I am going to get going because I have things in my future that I want to obtain. I have goals, I have ambitions that I need to pursue. And so I'm going to cast that thought aside and move on. Hey, leaders and learners, Leonard Geddes here, founder of the Learnwell projects, where my mission is to make learning more visible, manageable, and effective. So I just want to take a minute to catch up with you all. It's been a while since I've posted any personal information about me. So I wanted to take you in on this experience just to update you. As you know, I'm in the midst of writing this book and I'm really enjoying the process, although there are moments when it's frustrating, it's challenging, but overall, it's been an exhilarating process for me. I can honestly say that. But there are moments, and I want to talk to you about how to navigate some of these moments, moments when your mind is working against you, when your mind is at war against the efforts that you're trying to do. And this is something that I believe all humans face. For those who may be watching this and don't know my background, I do have a background in mental health. That's what my master's was in. And in mental health, we identify this thing called self-talk. And so what happens is, say you have a bad mood. You have a mood that's either a bad attitude, or maybe it's just a mood where you just feel frustrated. Well, those moods often have underneath it a form of negative self-talk, and that's simply thoughts about yourself that your mind is kind of producing in the background of your mind that's actually creating sort of a negative mood. It's sort of the it's the background of the negative mood. It actually causes it. And so this happens for me sometimes. I'm a naturally positive person. And so, but even I struggle with self talk sometimes. So, for example, while I'm writing this book, a thought may emanate out of nowhere that will say, "Who are you to write this book? Who wants to hear from you?" And I'm kind of shocked because I'm like, well, I mean, I've spoken about this topic for 20 years and I've gotten great responses for throughout the nation and beyond with it. And I've been asked to write this book by a publisher who understands the marketplace. So anyway, there's all these reasons for me to justify me writing this book, but that negative self-talk, if I allow it to stay, it can fester and it can take me down a negative trail that leads to no positive work. It can actually sideline my work. So I just want to share with some of you some things that I do to overcome self-talk with the hopes that it will help you. So you may not be a writer, but if you're a human, then you deal with this as a parent, as a maybe you're a child of a parent, maybe you're an athlete, maybe you're an artist, maybe in your just an everyday work or whatever it is, maybe you're trying to eat healthier, live healthier. You have to be able to overcome negative self-talk if you're going to have sustained success. So number one, recognize the mood. It's pretty simple that if you're in a mood, then just recognize it. Gosh, why am I in such a bad mood? That's the first step, is just to recognize that you're in this mood. The second step is to identify negative self-talk. Identify those thoughts that sometimes feel like they're you talking about yourself, but it's actually a critic in your mind. It could sound like a parent. It could sound like a child of yours. It could sound like a colleague. It could sound like a boss. Usually, the negative self talk will take on the voice of someone else. And it's just sort of in your mind. And I'm sure you all are probably recognizing self talk, negative self talk, as I'm mentioning this, but you need to really recognize the danger that negative self-talk can play, the role that it can play, the destructive role, I should say, that it can play in your lives. And you need to take control of that. And the first step is to recognize the mood. The second step is to identify the negative self-talk. The next step you want to do is to replace the negative self-talk with something positive. It's like a weed. If you don't uproot it, then it will continuously come back time and time again. So you can't just ignore it, because if you ignore it, there'll be other negative self-talk that you'll have to fight throughout that process. So you want to uproot that self-talk. Here's what I do that works for me. If that when that thought, not if, because it's going to come, when that thought comes and says, who are you to write this book? Even recording this, you think people want to hear from you? Here's what I do. I just focused on one person. If it's one person who hears from me, one person that reads this book and their academic career is turned around in a positive way, then that's good enough. And so I replace it with positive talk. This book is going to change the paradigm in higher education. I know it's going to. I have the receipts on it from all the conferences and educators and students that I've worked with throughout the years. I know that people want to hear this video because I hear from some of you who tell me how these videos help you out. And even if no one else wants to hear from it, guess what? It helps me out to communicate with people of like mind. And so that's the way that I overcome the self-talk. And then before you know it, I'm ready to go again. That negative self-talk is quelled. And then that positive self-talk has energized me, and I'm in a flow, and now I'm in a different state of mind. So again, I just want to encourage you to consider your negative self-talk. And when it comes up, remember, recognize the mood. Don't let that negative mood fester. I can assure you this, nothing positive in your life is going to come from being in a negative mood. That negative mood doesn't have to be necessarily depressed or anything like that, because, you know, like me, I don't struggle with those kinds of things. But that negative mood could just be tiredness. It could be a mood of complacency. Oh, I don't want to do anything right now. Oh, I've been working so hard, I need to do this. No, replace that. No, I am going to get going because I have things in my future that I want to obtain. I have goals, I have ambitions that I need to pursue. And so I'm going to cast that thought aside and move on. So anyway, number one, recognize the mood. Number two, recognize the negative self-talk. And then number three, replace the negative self-talk with positive self-talk. Don't let it fester. It's like a weed. It'll continue to grow, and eventually it'll take over. And I'll leave one last thing to you, which is really important. Watch what you listen to and what you hear. Now, I'm a big believer in it's actually a biblical principle that says, you know, your ears and your eyes is what gets into your heart. And so I encourage you to watch what you watch and watch what you listen to in terms of negativity. Now, there's a balance, right? You don't want to be sequestered away from any negative news, because information is important and you can't live in an information bubble, or else you will have other types of negative consequences. But you do want to make sure that when you're hearing things, you're not just hearing things over and over again. So I'll extend this a little bit more and share this with me. So I'm very careful about the news that I consume. First of all, I make sure it's from good sources. And secondly, I don't watch news over and over and over and over again, because for those of you who are my age, or I forget which age range this was, but if you were around when September 11, 2001 happened, you might remember when the planes hit the buildings, the Twin Towers in New York, they showed it over and over and over again, along with the footage from the other terrorist attacks. And there were some studies that shown that when kids saw these videos over and over again, they were terrified because they thought it was happening repeatedly over again and again and again. And, you know, those kids, I think, reveal something that happens in our minds. Even though we as adults, we know that it's a video, I think it still has an effect on us when we keep seeing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So one thing that I do is when I watch the news, I'm watching it to make sure that it's not sensationalized and that it's accurate. There are good news sources out there, and many of them are called mainstream, but they're actually good sources. The second thing that I do is I will watch it to see, am I gaining something new from watching this? And if I'm not gaining anything new from it, then why watch it again? I already know what the end of the story is going to be. So I've gotten that information, and then I move on to the next thing. So again, that may extend the video just a little bit, but hopefully that will give you some ideas of how the sources of negative self-talk arises within you. And then once you recognize those things, you can then begin replacing it with positive self-talk. So in addition to not watching, unnecessarily negative news, I also fill myself up with good things. So I'm thinking good thoughts. I'm listening to things that affirm me. So for example, right now I'm listening to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, because we just come out of this crazy 4-year period where families and friends are all at each other's throats because of the political dynamics in our country. And so for me, I wanted to read something that's about how to build relationships, how to be positive amongst people. And it's really been encouraging for me. So that's just a little extra, something that may help you out. If you like this video, make sure you like it. If you if you have your own ways that you've dealt with negative self-talk, then I encourage you to share that with others, because I'd love to learn from you, and I'm sure others would as well. Make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell so that you'll be notified the first time when new information comes out to you. Thanks.